Everybody, welcome back to the Entrepreneur's Essentials. This is chapter 14, and the title of this chapter is 7 Lessons Learned on the Journey from Founder to CEO. This is a very special chapter to me personally, as the journey on that path has been sometimes very difficult, but that's where I've really grown as an entrepreneur, and I hope to impart some of those lessons along to you. So I'm going to dive right in. This is a fairly long chapter. For this lesson from the Entrepreneur's Essentials, I decided to celebrate Austin Business Journal's Best CEOs of 2018, and I linked to that here on Medium. One of my good friends, Autumn Manning, won this year, and I recently did a podcast with her on company culture, and I linked to that podcast that she hosted here on Medium. So here we go with this lesson from the Entrepreneur's Essentials. It was first shared at Lucky7.io on February 15th, 2013. I hardly changed anything below, but I did make sure the grammar and links were corrected. 2 days ago, I had the honor of keynoting at the First Round Capital CEO Summit in San Francisco. The event was held at the Jewish Contemporary Museum. During my speech, I promised to put my notes up on a blog, and so here they are. My talk was about the 7 lessons I've learned on the journey from founder to CEO. First Round Capital, which I linked to here on Medium, invested in us when Bazaar Voice was under 10 people. They came in alongside Austin Ventures, where I'm now a venture partner, in our Series A. First Round has been an incredible partner in our journey from startup to public company. Personally, I think they're the best first round investor in the United States with the portfolio to show for it. Josh Koppelman, a fellow Wharton grad, is especially strong, and he has helped me many times along the way. I started off my talk emphasizing that the journey matters most in your transformation from founder to CEO. It is both a beautiful journey and also at times a gut-wrenching one. As Kurt Dando, my CEO coach of 4 years, says, "The path to heaven goes through the road to hell." This couldn't be more true. You aren't born knowing how to either found a company or be a CEO. You aren't born knowing how emotional this journey can be. But it is a journey that I've cherished, and in my opinion, the most profound journey that one can take in a career. It is a journey that led to me being recognized as Austin's best CEO for the large company category last year. That this doesn't mean I've done everything right or that I don't make mistakes. Hopefully, less of them are repeat mistakes. So here are my 7 lessons on this transformational journey. Number 1, the CEO must be the Chief Culture Officer. No one else has the power to be the Chief Culture Officer but the CEO. This is because the CEO is the synthesis point for all departments and the most senior executive at the company. They have the ultimate say on what a company decides to focus on, culture included. A founder CEO especially cares about the culture because they breathe the soul into a new being, the company, and like a parent, they should care about how that being evolves from childhood into adulthood. A company is like a person, and even legally treated as such. Some companies have a great brain, fewer have a great heart, and even fewer have a great soul. The CEO should care about nourishing the soul. You can tell when a company has a great soul just by walking the halls and feeling the energy. Does the company give you energy, or does it take your energy away? Nothing says more about your culture than who you hire, who you fire, and who you promote. The CEO has the most power to make those decisions. If the CEO promotes a brilliant jerk, one who performs well individually, but who no one wants to work with because of their attitude, then that speaks volumes about their company's culture. The CEO also has the ability to shape how the company serves its communities. I chose to establish the Bizarre Voice Foundation in our first year of life. I was influenced by watching the documentary, The Corporation, and I encourage you to watch it if you haven't already. Today, the Bizarre Voice Foundation has taken on a strong life of its own and is led by Executive Director Kelly Ballard with the help of a steering committee. The foundation was tops down only in our first year of history because I wanted to set the tone. From that year on, it had been led by a steering committee of volunteers who have solicited constant feedback from the people of Bizarre Voice. After Bizarre Voice went public, Deborah and I gifted a significant portion of our stock to help give the Bizarre Voice Foundation a boost. That is how much I've come to trust our people. Number 2, the CEO must constantly work on self-improvement and regularly take the time to reflect. After graduating from Wharton, where some of my fellow classmates felt that they had received the best education in the world, and it was indeed quite good, I felt that my business education was just beginning. I had founded Coremetrics during my last semester, and now I was in the real, raw world of being an entrepreneur. I was determined to read hundreds of leadership and management books in my first 2 years post-Wharton to help me in my journey, giving me the opportunity to apply what I read every day. I believe that books are read by leaders and magazines and newspapers are read by followers. This doesn't mean I never read a magazine or newspaper, but keeping up with the 24/7 news cycle doesn't improve yourself like a book does. A book causes you to think more deeply because decades or centuries of knowledge are nicely summarized. I discuss this mindset and practice in detail in Chapter 4, The Importance of an Always Be Learning Life. The CEO should also constantly seek out mentors. The reason I gave this talk is both because of how much first-round capital did for me at Bizarre Voice, but also because to teach is to learn, a mantra I live by in my own practice of reflection. And I am the product of many mentors, and I have found that if you reach out to people fearlessly, they will also respond to help you. This is deep in our DNA since 1776, as the US is a country with 1/4 of the world's GDP, and almost all of that wealth was self-created. When you reach out to successful people in the US, they may see some of their previous struggles and ambition in you and remember that they too were helped by mentors to become successful. I believe the US is very unique in this way. Deborah and I recently went to Israel for the first time, and we found it to be very similar because of similar circumstances for how the modern day country came into being post-World War II. Like the new Americans, the new Israelis had virtually no equipment to fight for their independence, especially right after the Holocaust. The CEO should also leverage a CEO coach, much like I have leveraged Kirk Dando, who is a very close friend. This was later reinforced by Scott Cook, the founder of Intuit, who also spoke at the first round CEO Summit, when he said one of his biggest mistakes was not using a CEO coach for the first 23 years of his career. To prepare for our IPO at Bizarre Voice, I leveraged 3 additional coaches, one to help with earnings calls, one to help with investor Q&A, and one to teach me to present to investors on the roadshow. I also talked about the importance of vacation in taking the time to reflect on what you have learned. I took 5 to 6 weeks of vacation every year at Bizarre Voice, and I believe this made it a better company. Sometimes these vacations would give me the clarity of mind to let go of an executive that I had been holding on to for too long, perhaps due to loyalty, even though they had scaled out. Sometimes these vacations made me sharper on strategy. Sometimes these vacations helped me focus our company more. It is easy to get defocused as a young company. Number 3, the CEO should own the long-term vision of the company. The CEO should carry this torch and light the fires with everyone, investors, employees, clients, and partners. This will create tremendous energy, both for the CEO and everyone else. The CEO also decides when to sell the company or keep growing. This is aligned with the long-term vision. How bright is the future? Is it real or is it a mirage? What kind of impact do you want to make? As I mentioned in this Lucky 7 post, which I linked to here on Medium, we could have sold Bazaar Voice for $25 million after our first year in business. Instead, we chose to go long because our long-term vision was too attractive to sell at such a price, and we built the company into a much bigger impact as a result, enriching many more people and the community beyond ourselves as founders. Number 4, the CEO should always treat recruiting as a top 3 priority. This includes upgrading your team. For example, I hired 3 CFOs in 6 years. This isn't easy, and again, reflecting on vacation helped with this. As CEO, you will be defined by those that you choose to report to you. If there's dysfunction at the top, there will be a huge ripple effect throughout the company, causing dysfunction throughout, including at the bottom. At Bazaar Voice, we relied on a rigorous recruiting process that mostly served us well, but no recruiting process is perfect. I referenced this in detail at the CEO Summit. I referenced it there. And instead of repeat it here, I'll refer you to Chapter 11, The Most Proven Way to Hire Well, where I discuss our unique recruiting process in great detail. People are the raw material of your culture, and ultimately that means your performance. Rapid growth brings out the best or worst in people. It causes everyone to stretch, and the pace is hard to keep up with. I found those with the wisdom that I mentioned in number 2 above scale the longest. Recruiting your board should especially be a focus. It is much harder to fire a board member if you have made a mistake. Don't get starstruck by pedigree. Spend the time to really get to know them and check their references. I discuss in detail how to reference board members and executives in Chapter 12, the importance of reference checking. Number 5, the CEO should choose to regularly celebrate at all hands meetings where vision, alignment, and transparency prevail. At Bazaar Voice, we chose the Alamo Draft House for our quarterly all hands meetings. This venue was tremendous because it was counterculture. At the Alamo, they have a sense of humor. Everyone arrived to lax. Drinks, including beer and food, were available throughout the day. With it being a fun movie theater, most of our presenters tried to one-up each other with the funniest, but most informative presentation. We would vote on who did the best, which stoked the competition and quality even more. We had a film festival. We had a band. All metrics were revealed. Everyone knew how we were trying to be aligned and what our goals and progress were. These events were magical. Early investors that witnessed them were wowed. They were my favorite days at Bazaar Voice, second only to our client summits. Only the CEO can choose for the entire company to spend this time together. There are many competing priorities. I discussed the mistake I made at Data.World by not having these until recently in Chapter 17, Action-Oriented Communication. Number 6, the CEO should evolve systems to keep everyone aligned. I was very influenced by Mark Benioff's book, Behind the Cloud, where he discusses his V2 MOM model. That's spelled V2, the number 2, MOM. I chose to make this simpler and call it the declarative B. in homage to our B colon logo. The colon stands for something profound that follows, and you can use it in many ways, such as B colon bold, be changing the world, be transparent, etc. The beauty of the V2MOM model is that everyone participates and forms their goals to be aligned with the corporate goals. It is a chain that goes from the top to the bottom to keep everyone aligned and happier. If you know how you're performing, and that is indeed aligned with the overall strategy of the company, then your work will be more fulfilling as a result. And this allows the company to constantly measure and constantly improve. I only wish that I had discovered this model earlier. Benioff says it is the key to Salesforce.com's perpetual success, and I believe it. Number 7, the CEO should embrace vulnerability. As the senior most executive, you are on the ultimate stage. Everyone is watching how you will behave, and to a large extent, they will mimic your behavior. The CEO should have a growth mindset versus a fixed one. No book explains this better than Egonomics. If the CEO has closed their mind to learning due to their success, I put this in quotes because there is always someone that is more successful than you, then many others in the company will also choose to stop learning. Taking the time to reflect is incredibly important for learning, and a CEO is very hard to mentor if they don't practice reflection. A CEO is impossible to mentor if they cannot be vulnerable. At Bizarre Voice, we practice vulnerability by reading books like Fierce Conversations, which I link to here on Medium, and having training programs around them. I discuss this more in Chapter 17, Action-Oriented Communication. We enabled individuals to regularly rate managers on whether or not they were living the core values. After all, are they just values on a piece of paper, or are we, as managers, going to truly live them? If we don't, then the paper is worth as much as the cost of the ink to print it. We regularly ran climate surveys for everyone in the company to evaluate our overall culture. And we recently found a tool to benchmark against other companies to see how we rank. We participated in Best Place to Work surveys where we were ranked against other companies in town. These are difficult practices. They require you to be open, and sometimes what you learn is hard to change, but to not do them and not make them a priority as CEO is to turn your back on the voice of your people, which ultimately will affect not just your culture, but your performance. The best speeches I have given at Bizarre Voice have been where I have been vulnerable. Like the time I hired an executive that didn't reflect our values and had to explain in front of the entire company how I made a mistake. Or the time that we faced the Great Recession and stopped hiring to protect our people. We all had to work double time, and in hindsight, we beat our goals, and I wouldn't have stopped hiring had I known. But in hindsight, everything is clear, and in going through the Great Recession, everyone was very concerned about what the fallout may be, and it made us a much stronger company at the time to pull together like that. Note that those with a fixed mindset will sometimes hold vulnerability against you, but I'm a believer in karma, and you should rise above it. Your people need you to be human. I really enjoyed speaking at the First Round Capital CEO Summit, and I hope this post makes you a better CEO. Reflecting on these and applying them to my past 3 years and helping build Data.World is very stirring in a good way. By the way, it's now been 5 years, and so this is a little bit dated, but we'll go ahead and read this as I wrote it here on the page. Number 1, the CEO must be the Chief Culture Officer. As I mentioned in my podcast with Autumn Manning on culture, which I linked to here on Medium, I still very much view one of my top priorities as CEO in this way. I'm constantly thinking about whether we have hired the right people in our company. For example, we recently hired Ryan Cush as our Chief Revenue Officer, and he has been a game changer for us. And Amy Neiman as our head of client services, who has equally been a game changer. They were both amazing at Bazaar Voice, and it is a real honor to be reunited with them again as we scale. By the way, Ryan and Amy are still with us and doing fantastic. Number 2, the CEO must constantly work on self-improvement and regularly take the time to reflect. This practice is a non-negotiable for me and has become part of my DNA. I still work with the same amazing CEO coach, Kirk Dando. That's true today, too, 2 years later. You can listen to a recent podcast I did with him on being a CEO, and I link to that podcast here on Medium. I still take the same amount of vacation time with my family to both recharge and reflect. I still study obsessively to keep on learning, and I wrote about that at the beginning of this year in Chapter 4, The Importance of an Always Be Learning Life. And I still work hard to build out a world-class mentor network as evidenced by our diverse and incredible investor base and our large advisory board, which Adam Grant, the Wharton professor and author, and Joanne Lippman, the former CEO of the newspaper USA Today, are the newest members of. It is an honor to have them both join. It is notable that I've devoted more words to this lesson than the 6 others in this post/talk. And Reid Hoffman, in his Masters of Scale podcast, just interviewed Arianna Huffington on this subject, and I link to that here on Medium. It is an important listen, and I've asked our Culture Club to assess the entry interview idea. Number 3, the CEO should own the long-term vision of the company. I recently took our entire company through the brilliant book, Play Bigger, and I wrote our collective point of view over many weekends and with much input from the executive team, many revisions. It is the most important strategic document I've personally written in the history of our company. If you haven't read Play Bigger, I couldn't recommend it more, and I link to it here on Medium. Yes, I still very much believe in and practice this. Number 4, the CEO should always treat recruiting as a top 3 priority. I obsess about this and already mentioned the addition of Ryan and Amy above. One of the main jobs of a CEO is to serve as the Chief Resource Officer, as I discussed in that podcast with Kirk Dando mentioned above. The Chief Resource Officer is responsible for attracting the best clients, partners, investors, advisors, and of course, employees. Number 5, the CEO should choose to celebrate regularly at all hands meetings where vision, alignment, and transparency prevail. I've taken this to a new level at Data.World, where I present our board decks after each board of directors meeting and detail what we discussed. However, I think we can do a better job at Data.World of making these fun. I miss those days at the Alamo Draft House during the Bazaar Voice years. So writing this makes me more committed to bringing back the fun of these presentations. I think we can do better here, but we certainly share all of the content and have many discussions about it. By the way, since writing this a couple of years ago, we did, of course, revert to the Alamo Draft House, and that's been a terrific addition. Number 6, the CEO should evolve systems to keep everyone aligned. I've had the benefit of having 3 co-founders since the beginning of Data.World. One of them is Matt Lessig, one of my best friends ever since we went to the Wharton School together as young MBAs. He serves as our COO and acting CFO. Matt has made practicing this lesson easier as he's established good systems from our beginning. And then Rafa Pereira, our director of software engineering, really pushed us to embrace OKRs three quarters ago. We have and are better for it. John Doerr, the famous venture capitalist, talked about the importance of OKRs in this year's TED conference. TED is an annual must-attend for me, and I love it. And I linked to John's talk here on Medium. And he came out with this book on the subject, and I linked to that book as well on Medium. This is a very important practice indeed. John Doerr credits it as the main practice that has made Google so successful since their beginning, as well as many of his Kleiner Perkins other portfolio companies. Number 7, the CEO should embrace vulnerability. Yes, I still make mistakes, lots of them. And I'm both very transparent with our investors and our team members about those to help set the tone for our other leaders to do the same. And we have had many sensors on since the beginning of our company, including the annual Austin Business Journal Best Place to Work survey. Around a year ago, we implemented Rally software to measure individual team resiliency, which has been helpful. And here on Medium, I linked to Rally. We still use it today, by the way. Rally co-founder and CEO, John Estanifos, has become a friend. Joe Boutros, our director of product engineering, pushed us to bring Rally in after experimenting on it with his team. And recently, our Culture Club, a volunteer, diverse group of people at our company that are very passionate about culture, designed and executed an engagement survey, which was very telling and actionable. As a matter of fact, right now at Data.World, we're in the process of, I think, our 3rd or 4th engagement survey, so I need to fill that out. Reading this reminds me of it. I would love to hear what you think about this lesson and how you assess your own journey from founder to CEO. Or how do you assess one that you worked for? Please share a comment. Note, this was originally posted on my blog at lucky7.io, where I've been writing about primarily entrepreneurship since 2012. The original post is there, along with an interesting comments thread from that time. And that, of course, is linked here on Medium.